I'm André Strijdom. I'm from POSA. I'm here to introduce the speaker to the session of what platforms means for the future of money. Your questions for the specific session, you can ask it via Slido. So all of you did receive that QR code in the previous session. So if you can use that to register, if you have not yet registered. And our speaker will then face the questions towards the end of the session. So to lead the session today, we have Chris Hamilton. So Chris is from Hamilton Platform, principal of Hamilton Platform. So with no further ado, Chris, welcome to the session and over to you.
Thank you. Oh, you got the code. I was going to say, because I missed the code before, does everyone actually have the Slido code? Can we just stick it up for 10 more seconds? Sorry, because I always hate it when they do that and then I don't have it and I can't ask the thing. There you go. So ask lots of questions. It's much more fun if it's interactive. And we'll get to them in due course. All right, we good? And action. Oh, I threw him there. I'm sorry, buddy. All right, there we go. Okay. You're probably wondering why I'm showing you this picture of a slightly pudgy Englishman, badly dressed. This guy's actually one of the world's foremost payments experts. David Birch, his name is. And he said something, this just popped into my Instagram on Friday or Saturday, I think, and it's kind of apposite. So let's just listen to it for a second, if we may.
A couple of years ago, Matt Harris and I published a couple of articles about the future of money, making the point that if you can tokenize assets of all kinds and you can trade these assets in liquid markets, why would you use the intermediary of a currency anymore? Why wouldn't you just trade baskets of assets for baskets of other assets? And a little futuristic, I suppose, but I don't think it's a ridiculous prediction at all. And now I read in the paper just a couple of days ago that in China, the totem of the monetary future, in China, real estate developers are letting people put down deposits on houses in fruit and vegetables. Peaches in particular, I think, were very popular for this purpose. So if you can buy a house using fruit and vegetables, like real fruit and vegetables, then buying a house using tokenized claims on future fruit and vegetables doesn't seem that crazy to me at all.
Okay, spot quiz. Who thinks that's a good idea? Who thinks that there's some logic there? Any at all? Any views at all? No? Okay, well, I can sit down then because most of my talk's going to be about why that's actually wrong. Sorry, but I have enormous respect for Dave, and he wouldn't mind me saying that because he takes the mickey from everybody else himself all the time. But I think that misses something really important about how money works, which payments professionals understand intuitively, and you come across every day in your businesses, but which people outside the industry often don't get. And to deliver the punchline early, that is network effects. The thing which that doesn't take account of is the network effect of money and why that is so important to making it successful. And we're going to talk a lot more about that and what its implications are in the emerging digital world. Before we do, we have to deal with the cage fight, okay? The punchline. Someone said to me slightly snidely this morning, "Oh, I see you've got the Money 2020 title to your slides," right? But there is a bit of a point to I don't know if you know this history, sorry. Zuckerberg and Musk have a sort of war of words in the media going on, or have done for the last few months. And semi-jokingly, one's, I've forgotten who's done it now, but has challenged the other to a cage fight. And there's been a lot of toing and froing and backing and filling and trying to decide who's going to actually organize this thing and whether it'll ever get done. That doesn't really matter. What's interesting about it is this idea of these two large social media networks going head to head. And we know that they do that commercially now, but there is a sense in which this is becoming a more and more important part of life in general, but more specifically what might happen to money in the future. And that's kind of why I thought the cage fight analogy was interesting. It's a little bit undergraduate, I grant you, the idea of these guys hitting each other, but the competition between these networks, how that affects the very large amounts of money that flows through their systems and what regulators do about that is kind of interesting and is changing the game for all of us, is my suggestion. Why? Well, let's just start with the obvious stuff. It's not the economy stupid in this case, it's the network stupid in this case, right? Money and payments have always been about network effects. A successful monetary instrument must be an instrument with very wide reach. That is a given, right? You can have the best designed type of money in the world. I don't care if it's paper or digital or anything. It's useless unless it's widely accepted. This is obvious to payments people, but surprisingly not always obvious to other people, right? So acceptance, reach, ubiquity, call it what you will, is the key determinant of success in payments. And the mobile phone, to tell you what you already know, has delivered a game changer in ubiquity and in network effects for payments, because for the first time in history, nearly everybody in a given target market has the same digital platform on which we can deliver services to them. And the future of money, like so many other network industries, is going to be about cheap smartphones. It has to be, right? There's no question about this. This is a given. And what happens with the evolution of money based on cheap smartphones is the kind of interesting thing right now. And there are some very powerful live experiments going on around the world, many of which I'm sure you've already touched on or have some knowledge of. But let's come to that in a second. Before we do, let's talk about platforms and what I mean by platforms. I hate the word ecosystem, which gets overused to the point of irrelevance, but a platform is an ecosystem. A platform is an environment which is designed to attract and keep your attention. That's my definition of what a digital platform is. Its function in life is to get you to be part of it for as long as possible. Why? Because your eyeballs are monetizable, right? Because you can be sold services, you can contribute data, which is a terribly important part of the platform business model. You can consume, you can provide content as well in this wonderful new digital era of everybody providing their own content. All of those good things, and the platform provider yields or generates and enjoys a portion of the benefit of all of that interaction. So that's an intensely networked activity, just to make that point again. It succeeds or fails by its ubiquity, by the number of people, the number of eyeballs that are attracted and held for a significant period of time. Make sense so far? Okay. So, we have to be talking in billions. We have to be talking in supranational organizations, because one nation is not enough for these things to work. That's also largely a given. There is, like it or not, an intense competition amongst them, which will play out in all sorts of interesting ways. And that competition is going to affect all our lives in meaningful ways. I genuinely don't know what the long-term outcome of this is, and I haven't heard anybody else express a really sort of authoritative view on it. But are we all going to end up with 10 platforms on our phone? What do you guys think? I would struggle with that. I can't look at 10 platforms at once. Right? But remember, these things are aimed to get me to stay as long as possible on them. So maybe 2, maybe 3, and they will keep adding services to try and draw me back to their platform, right? But there's another corollary which is equally important, which is the service, even if it's a really good service that I like, that is not on my 3 platforms. What's going to happen to that service? it's actually not going to get a lot of users. That's the problem here, that these things are systematically designed to get your attention and keep it. There's a corollary, which is the things that aren't on the platform don't get the attention. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but we've got to think about the implications of that for our businesses, right? There's a lot of data going around at the moment about how business is more trusted than government, more trusted even than, in many cases, non-government organisations. I say that guardedly, it's not universally true. The trust we're talking about here has to be thought about carefully. This diagram comes from a thing called the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is a pretty solid piece of work. They do a global, well, I think it's about 30 countries, and they do a statistically valid sample in those 30 countries and ask them questions about trust, who they trust, how their trust has changed over time, etc. Right? It's not about payments or platforms or anything in particular, just about who you trust, right? And the data's interesting. Business is doing really well at the moment. I don't know whether that's because of warfare and other things, but very solid increases in the trust that people will give businesses. And I think this is connected to platforms, actually, because when you say business, I think people at least partly think, hopefully they don't think Elon Musk, but Facebook, they think Twitter, they think those large things that are such a big part of their lives now, right? I think the trust is qualified. I don't think it's like, yeah, I absolutely want to, give everything I have to you. It's I trust you to follow your own interests as I understand them. So I trust you to be in the business of providing a network I really want to be on. Right? I don't necessarily trust you with my children, but I do trust you to provide the service that is going to make you wealthy and also give me what I want. That's the kind of trust we're talking about, I think. The trust is very community-based, community-related. This is just a survey of US adults. I couldn't find anything that was global and highly authoritative on this point, but there's dozens of these surveys out there. People like platforms because they're reinforcing of their community. And that's kind of obvious, but all of these surveys reinforce this. The one at the top about fake news, I interpret that as saying they tell me what I already know to be true. Because everybody's fake news is somebody else's truth, right? So we have to approach that with a bit of care, but it is still a community phenomenon. Fake news is a community phenomenon. You believe the stuff which is consistent with your community's views. You tend to brand as fake that which is not of your community. Does that make sense? Obviously, family and friends and so forth. You'd be relieved to know that the Zuckerbergs and Musks of the world don't have a huge impact. They're actually down the bottom. The CEO of the platform is likable. But community is the underlying logic of the platform. You can attract people's eyeballs. You can keep them for longer if you can reinforce their community beliefs. Regulators have got onto this as well. And there's still a lot of runway yet in the effective regulation of platforms. I'm still not talking about money yet, guys. Sorry, but the anti-competitive elements of the various things that they do to attract and keep your attention, their ability to get in the way of other competitors, their ability to affect other people's businesses and livelihoods, their ability to be even-handed, not be fake, their ability to protect the interests of a community. These things are all really difficult topics which we're not going to solve today and which regulators will continue to belabor the platforms on. And we're only at the beginning of this cycle. What does that mean for payments? Well, one thing's really obvious. Wallets rule. What do I mean by that? Nearly every platform that gets serious about commerce, and not all of them are yet, needs to add a wallet, needs to have a wallet. The wallet is the repository of value. It connects the activity on the platform that you want to perform, the service that you want to consume, with the value that has to transfer to enable that to happen. That's what the wallet does. So I'm using wallet here in a very broad sense to be the vehicle for storing and transferring value connected to an ecosystem that is a platform. And this data comes from the WorldPay report. They do a report every year on global activity in payments, but you can pick this up in lots of other publications. Digital wallets are increasingly the way people pay globally once you get away from cash. We know cash is a bit of a special case and has got longevity all its own. It's already way outstripped card activity if you look globally. Now, we don't always realize that because we and the Americans and the Australians and the Canadians and the British live in environments that are card-centric, right? So we think cards are the normal way you do retail stuff as soon as you get away from payments. The rest of the world doesn't think that. China doesn't think that. India doesn't think that. Brazil doesn't think that. Most of sub-Saharan Africa doesn't think that, right? And in all of those jurisdictions, cards are struggling to even keep their ground versus non-card digital payments based on the mobile. And the form those payments take varies a lot from country to country. There's not one way of doing this, right? But the key point is cards are not successfully competing in that space at the moment. They're not picking up the new business that comes as people come out of cash and go into digital payments. Other types of payments are, and that's just a statistical fact, which I'm happy to explore with you further. And that's why we're seeing these sort of large numbers for usage of digital wallets globally. It's all of those developing economies, it's all of those people coming out of cash as they get a little bit of prosperity and getting into being able to use digital payment methods. Overwhelmingly, that new class of person joining the community is not joining as a cardholder. They are joining as the holder of a digital phone executing a digital payment on that phone. And you know that we've all got to pay attention to that because, again, let's just talk about the broad demographic sweep of this. In most developing economies today, the first piece of new technology that your family is likely to have contact with is a mobile phone, right? You're not going to buy a television before you buy a mobile phone. You're probably not even going to buy a toaster before you buy a mobile phone, right? The mobile phone is the first and most important thing because it gives access to so many other things. And therefore, being on that mobile phone and attracting the eyeballs and keeping them on your platform is a critical part of business for the platforms, and they do it extremely well, and they will continue to do it extremely well. So let's talk about China for a bit. It's obviously a big example here. It is unique in so many ways, that is correct. And so its model won't necessarily play in other countries, but it's still an incredibly powerful model. It has digitized commerce faster than any other nation on earth, easily, like by a country mile, right? In doing so, it has done so largely on social media payments, so largely on Alipay, WeChat, and then there's a host of other would-be competitors to those as well, right? Just to jump to that, we in the West tend to have this idea that it's Alipay or WeChat, right? That's a bit wrong, actually. This is a cage fight. This is a cage fight amongst platforms because you've got a huge market with people who all have smartphones or will soon all have smartphones who have cheap data. So you've got the conditions set for a really aggressive fight amongst platforms to gather and keep eyeballs. And the consequence of that is that these platforms start from some specialty service that they can get a lock on. Didi is a ride-hailing organization. Taobao is, like Instagram-like video type stuff, right? They all start from somewhere, but to become a platform, you go from that core product to a range of products and services with value add and with the exchange of value that enables someone to come onto and stay on your network for as long as possible, because that's the business you're in, right? And these things are overwhelmingly private. I don't think there's an example of a government control platform anywhere in the world. These things are about making money. Let's not kid ourselves. But to do that, they've got to attract and keep the eyeballs, so they provide the service. So China's growth is as much fueled by that competition, that drive to gather eyeballs by offering services, and the growth in digital commerce, the growth in electronic payments, overwhelmingly instant payments over social media, is a consequence of that. And they have done more, and you can look at the World Bank stats on poverty eradication, but they've done more to lift people out of poverty in China than anyone else in the world, again, by a country mile. And it's a side effect of this, actually. It's because the first thing that the poor family gets when they get a little bit of prosperity is a mobile phone, and suddenly they have access to this world. A lot of it they can't afford yet, but that will happen over time. Not just China, though. So China is a special case, but there are lots of corresponding cases. I'm giving you a funny little example here, Sierra Leone, for no better reason than I'm doing work there at the moment, so I have all the stats. Sierra Leone is only 11 million people. It's had a nasty civil war over many years, so it's terribly poor, right? And it's dragging itself out of that poverty now. And yet it displays exactly the characteristics of nearly every other East African country in the mobile payment space, right? This is a very, very consistent story. 4 lines on the graph. The bottom blue line is mobile money in Sierra Leone. So that's gone from 4% in 2014 to 19% in 2021. Now, as at today, it's close to 25. So 1 in 4 Sierra Leone people now has mobile money account on their mobile phone. Might not be a smartphone in Sierra Leone. It's quite likely to be a feature phone, but that's the sort of statistic we're talking about now, and that's happened in the last 10 years. In the same period, green line, the banking system's marked time has actually not picked up business. That's a bit surprising, actually, because in other East African countries, there's been a sort of follow-on effect where mobile money is picked up and the bank accounts have picked up behind that. You can see that in Kenya very clearly. So the bank penetration in Kenya is quite good now, 60% or something like that, having followed the mobile money revolution up the curve, right? Not happening in Sierra Leone yet, but maybe that will change, right? And then the top 2 lines are the same stats, but for sub-Saharan Africa. So again, you're seeing phenomenal growth in mobile money, and we're talking Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. All of those sub-Saharan belt of countries are showing much the same characteristics. Nigeria is a special case because of its regulatory framework and its history, but by and large, this is what we see all across Africa. Now, my contention is that this is the birth of platforms in those countries, right? So the mobile money companies are really in the same business as the social media platforms. They're actually about getting and keeping your attention for as long as possible, right? They're still at the early stages of that evolution, but if you look at the way M-Pesa has come on, for example, you will start to see a lot of those sort of emerging characteristics. It's no longer enough to take the cash in the village, move it digitally to the city and cash out in the city, or the other way. Actually, it's the other way around usually, isn't it? Take the cash in the city, cash out in the village. As soon as you've got that market, you add other services. You try and keep the money in the system instead of having it going out all the time. Small point about the price model here, right? And I had done a lot of work on this because of Sierra Leone. Everyone says these guys are really price sensitive, and I'm sure that's true. But the amounts of money that are paid to cash out of mobile money accounts are startling, right? The charge is something like 4 or 5% of the cost, usually, not unusually, right? And yet people use these services very heavily. So just explain that to me, right? They can't. This must be so valuable that they are prepared to pay those prices for the cash transfer, right? And obviously, the regulator's game then is not to regulate that, but to add competition so that there are multiple alternatives and we drive those percentage prices down, right? Okay, so I think the $64 question, because it's kind of obvious what's happening in developing economies. I haven't dealt with India, I haven't dealt with Brazil. That would take another 45-minute lecture, sorry. And they are different. They're materially different from the examples I've given. But just to generalize the point, it's pretty clear where we're going here. These digital platforms are driving e-commerce. They are therefore driving digital payments in a transition from cash, and overwhelmingly that's happening in a mobile phone-based, usually real-time payment way, but different in different countries, right? The big question is, will that happen in developed economies or not? Because there's also an argument that says this is what happens when there isn't already an incumbent banking and payment system, and therefore it won't happen where there's already an incumbent. And I think there's a lot in that argument because of the network effects we were talking about. Nothing in the payments world, nothing succeeds like success. Once you have all the connections, and I don't mean this unkindly, you can be significantly worse in terms of service than a scrappy upstart, and you will still slaughter them because the network effect is so powerful. It's not about how good your product is, it's about how many people are using it. And that's just the way network industries work, unfortunately. It's a brutal game. Platforms are like that, money is like that too. I suspect, well, let's talk at the end about where all that is going in developed economies, because I think you can have a lot of views and we might have a good conversation. I just want to add one thing about artificial intelligence to that story about platforms. And I haven't got time to talk about artificial intelligence in detail, but it's just so important that I have to at least mention it. All of the really big money going into AI is going into it by platform owners, is the point I want to make. So, okay, we've all heard about OpenAI, which is actually an independent startup generative AI provider, but all the big money is being spent by Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and the Chinese guys as well, by the way, right? This is just from The Economist, and so they picked out those guys, Zuckerberg's outfit and so on. So I think AI and platforms have enormous synergy. I think AI develops a great deal of capability and power from being connected to a network, because a platform network, because that gives it a trusted environment within which to operate. And all of those bright ideas we had in the Internet of Things story that we're all on a few years ago about your car ordering its own replacement tires and the fridge replacing the milk when it ran out and stuff like that, all that stuff needs a trusted environment to work effectively. What's a platform? It's a trusted community environment. So I actually think platforms are the way we will see those things actually happening. It's not going to be the open internet. The open internet's a scary place, right? So this is my point about generative AI. AI will become capable AI that does stuff for you that's useful through platforms. And if you don't believe me, believe the money that's going into it from the platform owners. Let's leave you with that thought. Money is layered trust, simplistically. And the layering's important because there are multiple networks here with multiple network effects. You know the old story, where's my timer here? Yeah. You know the old story about money is three things. It's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, and it's a unit of account. Remember that sort of economics definition? That's true, but actually they are different networks. So the network effects for being a unit of account are different from the network effects from being a store of value, are different from the network effects of being, what's the third one? Medium of exchange. And technology, the biggest contribution of digital technology to us so far is it's pulled those layers apart so you can do one and not the other, right? So WeChat's wallet is primarily a medium of exchange. In China, people don't typically leave more money in their wallet than they need for their day-to-day activities, for their payments, right? It's not a unit of account, even though it is a type of money. The unit of account is the government unit of account, and that's for very strong regulatory reasons in China in particular. And the stores of value are increasingly those diverse stores of value. Now, remember what Dave Birch was saying about trading tokenized assets of various kinds. Peaches, I think he was going on about, all right? that idea's got a long history of that why will we need money in the future? Because the digital assistants, the bots, will be able to work out the value of all our assets and we can use them as money. That doesn't work because of network effects. It doesn't work because we all still need a single unit of account, a referent of value, to understand what something is worth. I can't measure the value of my car in peaches, or at least I could, but only if everyone else is using peaches all the time as well, right? So while absolutely I think many digital assets will become a lot more readily available as stores of value, I don't really see them becoming media of exchange, and I don't really see them becoming units of account. And those things have their own very important economic impacts and network effects. So I've done a more complex version of that, but it is just kind of that breaking money out into its different activities. And I'm not going to go through the detail because we haven't really got time, but they are layered and they build on each other. So I still think it's very likely that in a given community, and I don't mean necessarily a given country anymore, I mean a given community, you could say Facebook if you liked, it's very likely that there will be a unit of account that will be common for that community, and everybody will understand it and intuitively use it. And I don't think technology is going to change that. Whether that unit of account is the US dollar or a Facebook, that's a more interesting and difficult question, but you get the network dynamics, right? It's going to be sort of one unit of account per logical economic community. I talked a little bit about this already. I don't know if you've seen this money flower thing before. It's been around a lot, right? This is by a guy called Rod Garrett, Canadian. And it's a very interesting division of money into different types, built mainly to explain crypto and how it fits into the world, right? My problem with it is it doesn't tell me very much. It's interesting, but what do these distinctions mean for how likely different types of money are to be successful? And my answer is not very much, actually. They're not going to help us very much. Whether something is tokenized or account-based, or whether something is peer-to-peer or centrally issued, I don't think matters all that much. I actually think there are other things that drive how successful money is going to be, and there will be all those examples. So I said to you before that the key ultimate determinant of success is ubiquity. Nothing succeeds like success, right? It's the money we all have that we use, not the best money, right? All those ideas. So ubiquity obviously is your ultimate success criterion. But how do you work out whether the new type of money, which by definition doesn't have ubiquity right now because it's just starting out, how do you work out whether that is going to be successful or not? Because that to me is the really interesting question. And I want to propose an idea to you, which I think still needs a lot of work, but let's go with it. And it's the idea, based on all those things about platforms and network effects we've been talking about, that successful money will be money that has affinity, and I mean that in quite a specific way, the extent to which a monetary form reinforces the common interest of a community. Right? So what I'm trying to say to you is I think money will be successful to the extent that it is well adapted and highly useful to a particular community that is working with each other. That picture is of one of the stones of Yap. I don't know if you know this lovely story from money history. That's a form of money. There's an island called Yap in the Micronesian island in the Pacific. And these guys developed their own unique form of money where they had these huge stones that couldn't be created on the island. They had to be quarried elsewhere, so they had scarcity, right? And value was measured in these stones. Now, they're obviously not movable, so everybody just remembered in their head, because they're one village, basically, who owned which stone at each given time, and they could transfer in value and not move. It's like a bookkeeping system, right? That worked extremely well for them because it reinforced their community of relationships and kinship, and everybody had to keep the bookkeeping system in their head, right? This is a pre-written environment. Now, does that system have ubiquity? Absolutely not. It's a very, very weird system that only works in one place. But for that community, it worked extremely well. So for me, it had high affinity, right? It fitted into their cultural values. So I think affinity is something different from ubiquity. And no doubt some smarter heads will work out exactly what the dynamics of affinity are. But I think we can use it to think about how likely different types of money are to succeed. And I'm just making some stuff up here, right, with this idea. Cash in real life, for me, had high ubiquity and high affinity. High affinity because the definition of cash is something issued by your ruler, your sovereign, which has got that person's authority on it. It's the stamp of authority. So the value of money is not whatever's the weight of the gold. It is the stamp of the guy that says this is real money, right? And that's important because the ruler had a lot of other control on your life. So that created a lot of affinity in that community. That's going to struggle to work, isn't it, in environments where the communities are supranational, where the national regulations don't matter so much anymore. So little flag of concern there, right? But I get the affinity of cash and why it's so enduring. IBM shares is a little bit like Dave Birch's peaches, right? These are things which could be tokenized and could be used as money. There's absolutely no problem with that. But how likely is it to have any real meaning? It would matter if a particular community really had staked its existence and life and value on the future success of IBM as a company. Then it would have affinity with that group. That'd be great, right? Most of us, not so much. So I don't think that's a goer. And I think that peaches are not really a goer for the same reason. It's not obvious what the affinity is, right? Where is the link to a critical mass of community? I kind of have slightly the same problem with CBDC, actually, to be honest with you. I don't say it can't work. Technology can work fantastically well, no question at all, right? But it's not obvious to me why it will have strong affinity with enough of a community for it to be widely used. And that may be a design question. Maybe we can design CBDC in a way where it works really well for that purpose. It's not completely obvious to me right now, and I think we have to think more carefully about the community that's going to use it and what binds them together. Okay. So I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts about the implications of this, right? I think you're getting where I'm going here. Money is going to get tied to platforms. It's going to be hard for it not to be because the platforms are the new, strong ecosystems that will have affinity. And they will see money as an important element of their total business, which is to attract your eyeballs. Now, regulators can affect that, obviously, and might affect it differently in different countries, but absent particular regulation, I think we will tend to see money having a tighter and tighter connection with platforms. And I'm trying to draw here a picture of a customer out view of a platform. Right, so let's take the classic customer-centric approach. Customer accesses everything through a wallet, in my view of the world. You might have several wallets, but increasingly you will have something on your phone, which is your starting point for all of this stuff. It's the entry point to the platform. And from that, you get access to communities, of course, but you also get access to identity provision, so proving to other people who you are. You get access to stores of value, and I'm prepared to believe there may be multiple currencies in a platform. In a way, you can regard the more sophisticated loyalty programs as currencies that can sit in this thing, as long as they're coordinated, as long as you can resolve them back to your core value, right? And content on your network, and here I'm focusing on banking in specifically, financial services, insurance, credit, and the other services that retail bankers can provide become elements of content on this platform and are accessed through the wallet. Chinese retail banks are already pretty much in this space. They're not trying to run their own networks anymore because WeChat's doing that for them, right, at Alipay. What they're doing is offering their financial services on those platforms to retail users. So that's a sort of confronting view for a lot of bankers because it means your traditional view of your world is changing pretty fast. You have to pick one or more of those roles and structure them together as a meaningful business. And remember, if you pick communities, if you decide you want to go into the platform business, Godspeed, but you're up against Google. So just saying, you need to be pretty clear what your binding community of interest is there, I think. You're going to have a much better job providing really good quality financial services. You may be a fantastic wallet provider. That's a possibility. Hard for me to see the bundle service being offered by a bank in many jurisdictions. Just a personal view. So this is kind of what I'm saying here. Where do you go in that world? What package do you put together if you're a banker? Last point. If you think it's hard for bankers, it's hard for regulators as well. Because most regulation is intuitively built around institutions. Shouldn't be, and we keep trying to talk about functional regulation, but we never quite get there, right? And so most banking regulation, most payments regulation is built around the assumption of a prudentially regulated bank as its core idea, at least in developed economies. That's not going to work in the future. In this world, that's clearly not going to work. First of all, platform regulation is going to have to be very specific to platforms. And as I said, we're only at the beginning of that. Secondly, there's going to be a whole range of regulation around curating content for people. So the wallet providers, how do they get regulated? And that's consumer protection regulation by and large, right? That's where you will do consumer protection regulation. Currencies, I think, will bind more and more towards platforms, and so will have to be regulated as part of that bundle, in my way of thinking about it. And then content provision will be functional. So if you're providing an insurance service, I don't care if it's a DeFi insurance service or some other type of insurance service. If it walks and quacks like a duck, then you've got to be regulated as a duck, basically. But our regulators are not set up for this at the moment. This is a completely different way of thinking about the world, and I think we'll have to get there in stages. Okay, so I hope that's been provocative enough, at least to make you think, right? Yeah, Mark. Thanks, Mark. I don't think it's ever going to happen, do you? But the cage fight is real, trust me. Thanks very much. We've got some time for questions, I think. Let's see what Slido says. Oh, there's lots of questions. Okay. Shall I just go through these in order, shall I? How does card stay relevant in a wallet-dominated world? Yeah, that's a very tough call. Obviously, one answer is to become a wallet. And you can see card evolution, the card companies tailoring their devices more and more, their products more and more in that direction. But I don't think I've come across a developing market where they're actually picking up the new business, the card companies. In Sierra Leone, we've already launched the card switch, and we're now working on instant payment switch. Now, the switch is not the key thing. It's the fact that the mobile money companies have just swamped the market really quickly, right? They have way overtaken every other product. But I don't really see card ever developing as a very competitive product in that environment. So I suspect the answer will be, like anything, the card companies will tend to evolve into service providers which don't rely on that kind of structure anymore, and they'll have to adopt what I think will have to be a rather lower cost model in order to prosper in this world. So that's, and I think you already see quite a lot of that happening. The next question is, what is the SA construct for this landscape of POS and e-commerce? That's a really good question, and I wish I knew the answer. South Africa is a really unusual market because of it's like two markets in one, the developed market and the developing market. And the developed market here is served incredibly well, better than many other developed economies, no question about it, right? But we seem to have not managed to make inroads into the developing economy, even when we've given them cards, ironically, because, of course, that's what happened with social welfare payments around 10 years ago. We gave everybody cards. That seemed to have almost no impact on financial inclusion, if you look at the stats, right? So, which is disappointing, frankly. I can't help feeling that the long-term answer to that has to be the provision of very low-cost wallet-based or platform-based financial services to the underbanked community. But exactly how that's going to happen, I'm very happy to take suggestions from the audience, because I think it's a difficult path from here, given where we are. What are the barriers of a WhatsApp digital wallet launching globally, as it seems inevitable? This is Will. Having the biggest backing imaginable, I would have expected it sooner. Yeah, that's a powerful observation. There are WhatsApp wallets in some jurisdictions. I believe India has a WhatsApp wallet based on the UPI technology. But there doesn't seem to have been a concerted effort to generate that. The other thing we haven't yet seen with WhatsApp is it hasn't really made that platform play. So it has focused very specifically on being a short messaging app. But it's not trying to add advertising, consumable services, or at least, when I say not trying to, it's not obviously doing that to me. I'm not an expert in the subject. I think when that happens, you're going to see a very big movement in this space. We know that Elon Musk has that ambition for Twitter, for example. He's been quite public about that, and he started buying money transfer licenses in various states in the US. So he clearly has the ambition to make that leap of Twitter going from a short message broadcast to being a platform in the sense in which I'm using the term. And from there, he's absolutely going to be interested in money. Money is going to be a key part of that picture. So I haven't really got a good answer to the WhatsApp question, but I think it's a smart observation. In a community with low internet penetration, do you see telco data being a viable currency with ubiquity and affinity? Nice question. Yes, absolutely. I think anything can be a currency, and I think technology gives us that power. But again, the question is ubiquity. So will it be adopted in a widely enough community for it to make sense as a currency? And I think for the time being, my observation about Africa is that the states are keen enough to keep control of their economic environments that they'll work quite hard to keep the unit of account, at least, as being the national currency. And so we'll probably end up in Africa, my suspicion, is with wallets that carry several national currencies, depending on your particular needs and desires. And that's how we will do business on our platforms. That's my gut feel. Obviously, that's a massive generalization, but the super app concept has only worked so far in China. What has stopped the big Western platforms from making more progress? Yeah, I don't fully agree with the premise of the question. I actually think there's been quite a lot of progress towards super apps, and you absolutely see it as a work in progress in other countries. But it's more developed in China than anywhere else. And you want me to stop? I'm just loving the questions. Okay, sorry.
I think everybody, thank you very much, Chris, for a very insightful presentation. Very much enjoyed. PASA delegates, so there's a next session starting in a couple of minutes, so you're more than welcome to stay on for that session, or otherwise you will have an opportunity to quickly move towards another session. Thank you.